If you're a singer who has a really hard time finding their big voice that fills out a room, then this video is for you. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Catherine. I am a singer, yodeler, and vocal coach who lives in Los Angeles, and I love to help people with their vocal technique as well as with the psychology of their singing, because that's a big part of singing and it should not be overlooked. Stick around for some tips on how to make your voice feel bigger and louder and more bold, and how to just feel more liberated while you're singing. Today I want to talk about the mindset behind singing, because even though technique is very important and it can help you get louder, it's not gonna help you make your voice as big as you want it to be if you're stuck in that small, quiet place. And I'm gonna tell you why, and I'm gonna tell you how you can move toward a place where your voice feels comfortable and loud and bigger and more versatile. And I think that's what we all want, because not only do we want singing to sound good, we also want it to be fun. And that is part of it as well. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my story and how I started singing so you can understand where I'm coming from. And then I'm gonna get into why I think this is so important and how you can find your real voice. Not the small version of it, but the whole version of it that encompasses the small, quiet voice, as well as the medium voice, as well as the more talky voice, as well as the really big voice that goes for the high and loud notes. When I started singing, I naturally would sing very breathy in my head voice. I didn't know that I could sing any different. I was just in 6th grade and I would sing with my friend. She was playing the piano and I would sing, and it was very much like, I don't even know a song. If I was just singing happy birthday, it was like, happy birthday to you, happy birthday. So you get the gist. That's how I was singing in the very beginning. And I didn't know how to be louder. I didn't know that there's anything wrong with it. And I'm not even saying there's anything wrong with it now, but I know a lot of us want that bigger voice. So as I was singing more and I was using my head voice more, because I always sang in head voice, it did get stronger, and I actually developed a pretty strong head voice, which is great to have. I would encourage anyone to practice a lot in their head voice, because it does make all the other parts of your voice stronger as well, especially once you're trying to get to mixed voice. You need to get to the same place resonance-wise, or to a very similar one than the one that you have in head voice. But that's beside the point right now. So I knew well how to sing in head voice, and I knew at some point how to make that stronger, but I still was lacking that full-bodied voice that some songs required in order to make them feel the right way. Because we can sing anything, almost anything with head voice. We can sing almost anything quieter. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you are happy with what you're doing and as long as you are having fun. So I went to music college and I studied voice, and I had different classes, but obviously I was singing a lot. And from a lot of different places, I felt like they just really wanted to help me sing louder, to a point where I felt like something was wrong with me and I just couldn't do it. And my voice was wrong for what it was. And what really didn't work for me is that I felt this pressure to sing a perfect big version of my voice, of a part of my voice that I hadn't used up until then, or hadn't used much. And so I started squeezing and I started pushing a lot. That's the only way I knew how to have a more substantial, big voice without going to my head voice and thinning out my sound. But obviously that wasn't the right way either. And as I was doing more lessons and experimenting with my voice more, the trick that I found for me was to just allow myself to experiment. And in the moments where I was alone and where I didn't feel any pressure to sound perfect is where I found the part of my voice that sat in a good place and that allowed me to project really well. And that actually is exactly what I was trying to do so hard for so many years, as I was pushing, as I was just squeezing up my chest voice, and it felt so uncomfortable, and it always felt like there was a limit on how high I could go, and then it didn't sound great because you can hear it when someone's pushing and squeezing. And so that's my little story. Obviously, there's a lot of details that are missing, but just to kind of give you the gist of it. As I'm teaching a lot of my students, I'm realizing that some of us, especially women, especially adults, often have a problem of it's so hard for us to allow our voice to come out for different reasons. One, we want to sound perfect as we do it. So we restrict ourselves in a way that isn't helpful, because if our voice doesn't have room to come out, it's always going to be so much harder. Two, sometimes we're just too afraid of actually fully letting it out and taking up space, because we're always being told to, behave and be quiet and not be in anybody's way. And some of us obviously are better at taking up space than others, but for those of us who feel like we inconvenience others when we're too loud, whether it's because we're practicing in our apartment or just generally even talking too loud, when we're not used to taking up space physically or with our volume, with our voice, or even in ways that we don't feel like we can't express our opinions, all of that comes back to your singing voice as well. Because there's so much there's so much psychology in singing and what we allow our body to do, that just because you're strict on your voice and because you try to mold it with certain techniques doesn't mean your voice will go there if your head is telling you, no, I can't be loud. And even the tiniest bit of letting your voice come out feels so loud to you sometimes, even though it really isn't. And sometimes it feels like we're yelling and we're shrill, or it's too much, when really it's so loud in our head and we're just so afraid of being heard. But we're really just singing and letting our voice come out, and that's totally okay. So that, most of the time, I find in a lot of my students, is the big tricky thing, to find a specific part of your voice, like the belting. Sometimes you have to do things loudly and boldly first before you can moderate them and mold them into the exact sound that you want. But that's the other thing, is we expect it to be perfect right away. We don't give ourselves permission to experiment before we perfect something. But you can't perfect something if you haven't found the actual thing first. You need to dig through the mud a little bit. If you were to find a diamond and you wanted a shiny diamond, you would have to get your hands dirty and find it. You might have to look in different places, and it's also not going to come out as a perfect diamond. So get your hands dirty first, find the diamond, and then you can start to, make it shiny and work on it. But none of these, you won't reach out your hand and find a perfect shiny diamond right there. I mean, you can buy one, but you can't do that with your voice if your voice isn't at that point. And you can't hate yourself into making your voice a certain way. The way to do that is by really playfully experimenting and being loud and expressing feelings and emotions, allowing yourself to yell when you're angry, allowing yourself to sing a wrong note. I always tell my students, why don't you try sounding ugly once? Just sing it like a person who doesn't know how to sing at all and just lets their voice out, because sometimes those are the boldest people. They just let their voice come out. They don't think about it much, and they often really don't sound that great. But the one thing that they have is that boldness, that loudness, and sometimes that's just the first step that we need to do in order to then work on that voice. And the funny thing is, whenever I tell my students to sing ugly and just be out there, their voice opens up so much. They don't sound ugly. They just sound like their voice is finally coming out. And when your voice is finally coming out, now you know what that feels like, where it sits, and then you know, okay, now I maybe can control it a little bit more. But the first thing you have to do is you have to let it out. And then you can see, okay, what do I need to do with it? If you try to squeeze it from the beginning and you try to be really strict with it before you even start, and you're like, it has to be this way, I have to push it there, it's not gonna be able to just be that nice full voice that sounds unrestricted, the way that we hear it in so many songs that inspire us to sing a certain way. So this is more of a mindset talk than, obviously, and we're not really going over technique in this video, because I want you to just experiment, and I want you to do it freely and not in a forced way. I want you to do the things that you already do in everyday life. Maybe just yell here and there, or say hey very loudly, or just sing ugly and see what that feels like. What you want to look out for is that it feels natural and not forced. If you feel restriction, if you feel restriction here, that's what you don't want. So go away from that. But anything else that your voice is doing, allow it, and allow yourself to feel into it as you're finding it, because you can't just land somewhere perfect with your voice if you haven't ever been there. I also tell my students, you can't really, if you're new in a city, you can't, sometimes you just have to walk around a bit and see what's there, and explore it a little bit and see, where are your places? What do the different places feel like? What do they look like? How would you know if you don't explore it all? You have to explore it. And then with time, you're going to figure out what feels right and what sounds good to you. And that's the way. But especially as women, or people who have been silenced either by other people, or just feel like we should be quieter because of society, or we shouldn't take up as much space, working through that and maybe journaling and giving yourself some journaling prompts on why it might be that you feel like you have to hold back, that can be a very big step in actually exploring your voice more. It's at least half of singing is mental, and that's a very big component. And again, you can't hate or push your voice into a different version of itself if you haven't considered what's going on in here. So I highly encourage you to work through that a little bit, ask yourself some questions if this resonates, and experiment. Have fun with where your voice takes you, and allow yourself to explore your emotions. I find anger can be a very good motivator to just sometimes let your voice come out, and don't try to sound pretty. You don't need to sound pretty all the time. Sometimes you just need to see what your voice can do, and then you can decide how much of my voice and where do I want to use my voice and what does that feel like. And when you sing a song that has a specific emotion, try different angles. Work on technique, obviously, because technique is important, but it won't get you to the end goal if you still are stuck here. Try the angle of really diving into the emotion of the song, or how you connect to the song, and think of that. Close your eyes and really think of that, and have it be more important how you're feeling as you're singing the song than how you're sounding. And you can record yourself, you can see what that does, if that changes your voice somehow, if that makes different parts of your voice come out. And even if it just makes you feel different as you're singing, compared to always constantly thinking about, how do I sound, how do I sound, how do I land this note perfectly and this specific technique. I think it's important to do that sometimes. So I hope that helps in some way. I'm talking about it today because I find that to be an issue still for myself, because we are always worried. I'm always worried that I'm too loud, and I know a lot of my students are. Sometimes we forget what our voice is because we have a singing voice, and the singing voice is nothing like our talking voice. And granted, different ranges of your voice will take you to different places of your voice. So it's gonna feel different when you're up in higher notes, because that's not where you talk. Most of us don't talk up super high. But if you know where your voice sits when you talk, or in your everyday life, then start from there and start using that voice without restricting it, and sing some things. And don't try to sound pretty. Just try to sound real with your voice. No one has to hear you while you do this. Just experiment with it. But I promise you that you will discover something new about your voice and new ways in which to use your voice. And it's gonna open up some more possibilities as far as singing and different sounds. And hopefully it's also gonna free up some mental blocks, because mental blocks aren't fun, and we all want to just feel like we can let go. And singing can be a great transformational tool because we can express our feelings, but we can only express our feelings if we really let ourselves, without constantly being in our head about how loud are we, how right are we, how pretty do we sound. Sometimes feelings just need to be expressed, and sometimes the voice just needs to be let out. So let me know how that goes for you. Let me know if that helped you at all. Let me know what your own experiences are with this topic. If you have similar experiences than me or my students, or if you have other blocks that you think are keeping you from finding your truest and fullest and biggest voice. I'd be super curious to read them. If you like this video, please give it a like, and if you want more of these videos, please subscribe to my channel and definitely let me know in the comments. I'm so happy you were here today, and I'll see you next time. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.